Now, unlike perhaps the most reflexive interpretation of this title, Morioka Moriko-san is not a woman in denial about her state as an MMO junkie. To the contrary, she's one to remind herself of that state obsessively. No, Moriko is a junkie for self-doubt, self-deprecation, and denial. Apologies and self-demeaning comments populate Moriko's dialogue to a degree that becomes outright oppressive. Moriko truly believes herself to be a worthless, off-putting woman with virtually no redeeming qualities, and when you realize the depths of this debasement, it does defy expectation. But hold on, the cry goes out. MMO Junkie is an incredibly warm, humanizing series. I clapped my hands with a schoolgirlish glee whenever the romance advanced some small, unsteady step. I shed tears multiple times throughout as the perfect words of comfort were shared. Well, I reply to the amorphous void of MMO Junkie viewers, that oddly specific experience with the series is oddly identical to my own, but setting that aside, there is a very good reason for the dissonance between the bleak atmosphere I described and the typical moment-to-moment tonal experience of watching the series. Enough cheeky roundabout prose on my part. This anime treats the darkness of these elements of Moriko's character the same way she does. It denies them, as best it can at least. Just as Moriko makes jokes of her own, sometimes deeply damning comments about her value as a person, the visual language of the series speaks to the viewer with its familiar stylized gag visuals to communicate this same dismissal of any serious consideration of these sentiments. With all these adorable, goofy antics, it becomes extremely easy to simply forget the pain face you peered behind the mask when it dropped for half a second, which is exactly what Moriko wants. She'd rather treat her issues with a sort of glib, sardonic humor, and thus is able to avoid addressing them. Eventually, the pressure builds though, and where one second Moriko was being comically crushed and ground to dust by her many insecurities, the next an empathetic onlooker steps in to cut through that pretension, and to allow Moriko and the viewers to recognize just how unhealthy that state of mind is. In fact, Moriko has gotten so good at deceiving herself that in most cases throughout the series, it is the interjections and objections from others, from those able to view these remarks of hers from outside perspectives, that are able to recognize and seek to help Moriko in addressing the harmful sentiments underlying them. Moriko is in desperate need of a person to listen to her extended lists of her own insufficiencies and give a simple, "Stop. You're wrong." And thankfully, Sakurai is perfect for that task in every way. The key that makes him the USB Wi-Fi router to her desktop. Wait, hold on. The support to her DPS is the fact that the two of them are actually remarkably similar. Both of them are extremely considerate, accommodating people, highly attentive to the statuses and accompanying needs of those around them. Both are entirely ready to selflessly tend to those needs to the best of their abilities. This sounding familiar? That's because, in real life, just as in the MMOs they play, Moriko and Sakurai are healers. It's not a coincidence that back when they were playing Nanter SG together, back when both of them were at deeply troubled points in their lives, the two of them both played support characters, and provided a mutual support to each other that was desperately needed. Sakurai eventually came to terms with and moved past the inner turmoil caused by his adoptive parents' passing when he was still relatively young, while Moriko left the job that was troubling her so much at the time behind, but could not do the same for her deeper underlying issues. It's not a coincidence that now in Fruit de Mer, Moriko is no longer playing support while Sakurai still is. Sakurai no longer needs her to be fulfilling that role within their relationship dynamic, while she still needs quite a bit of it from him. Much of her relationship with Lily is built upon a gentle, simple validation of the idea that her meandering musings hold some value, a sincere and passionate investment in what each of them has to say. With all these similarities then, what is the factor that makes Sakurai different, puts him in his much healthier state of mind? Simply put, he lacks the crushing self-esteem issues that burden Moriko. He's got that same readiness to prioritize others as her, he just does so without, because they matter and I'm worthless, being the thought that comes bound to it. And Moriko really requires that of him. She needs it because without someone to challenge her constant apologies and engage in a fierce battle over whose fault it gets to be, she'd simply keep foisting all the blame for everything upon herself. Beyond any other issues that does cause until Sakurai becomes a more active figure in her life, that habit of hers would destroy the relationship simply due to her viewing herself as so unworthy, as bringing so much hardship to it. Sakurai will insist emphatically enough that for the first time in a long time, perhaps the first time ever, things aren't entirely her fault. She's hyper-aware of every tiny shortcoming she may have. Her behavioral tic of impulsively lint-rolling things to me demonstrates an obsession with minuscule, largely insubstantial blemishes and imperfections on her part. At one point, she apologizes for being too self-deprecating. Even her recounting of her flaws is something she considers to be a flaw. And yet, she can't quite recognize her one key flaw, attempting to deny that any of this is a problem. Recovery of an MMO Junkie is such a thoroughly heartwarming and charming series, in part because it's so easy for us as viewers to get wrapped up in and convinced by this warped perspective that Moriko views the world through. The real knockout punch to my heart here is the simplicity of the solution to this situation that Sakurai presents. Sometimes, perhaps a lot of the times even, what you need most is just someone to tell you, no, you're wrong. No, you aren't worthless. No, you aren't an unwanted burden. No, I would not be better off without you. A simple, honest denial. An accurate one this time. No. Big news this time, boys, so stick around. Patreon recently changed up its model somewhat, so creators get a bit more money and patrons pay a bit more. It started charging them the processing fees instead. Now, this particularly hurt per creation patrons, because they'd get charged this fee multiple times if you made multiple things. In order to minimize this cost for my patrons, I've switched over my Patreon to a monthly one, but currently it's at about 2/3 of what I've been taking home monthly without people having cancelled. Mostly, this is just a large number of current patrons who haven't updated their pledges. A bunch of people giving $1 a video 3 times a month, or $5 at that frequency, are still on $1, in spite of that now being a single monthly pledge. This is primarily just a PSA to those people. If it isn't actually the case that a full third of you have had the amount you'd like to support this channel with every month go down, then please update those pledges to be at whatever level of patronage you do want to be giving. If you haven't updated your pledge, even if you want to just be giving that original amount on a monthly basis now, you also don't have access to Patreon rewards currently, since switching to monthly booted you off for some reason. So, if nothing else, I'd encourage just updating your pledge and leaving it at what it is currently to be able to get those. There's no patron read this video just because there's so many people who probably should be in it but aren't actually in the tier currently, but that'll be back next video when, hopefully, this is all settled down. I won't lie, making the switch was pretty nerve-wracking and, as of right now, kinda still is, but it's better for the people choosing to support me, so it's worthwhile.